Hi, Rod Fleming here. How are you doing? I'm still in the Philippines and I'm staying here for a while. But anyway, I want to talk to you today about why I changed my mind about autogynephilia. And it was quite an important thing. For me anyway. I had been studying transsexualism, particularly male to feminine transsexualism, that is, the subject of people born male who wish to live and appear to be women, for many years. I'd read all of Blanchard's papers. I'd read Mike Bailey's book, The Man Who Would Be Queen. I'd read most of the other literature that I could find, and still I was just... the autogynephilia thing seemed wrong. There seemed to be something strange about it. I could understand it when we were talking about middle-aged cross-dressers, people like Bruce Jenner, for example, who after a long career, well-documented career of secretive cross-dressing, sexually fetishized cross-dressing, decided that he was going to actually be a woman. Now, that I could understand. But the issues of younger presentations I found difficult. I really couldn't get with it. And I further could not understand, it was really a complicated one for me, why it would be that autogynephilia appeared only in the West. And this is a claim that has been made by several authorities, that autogynephilia is a function of Western society. Yet at the same time, other authorities, particularly Mike Bailey, for example, have said that they consider it to be innate. Well, if it's innate, it can't be a function of society. You know? Innate things are innate. They should appear everywhere. You should find them everywhere. At roughly the same levels. Now, okay, you're going to see some degree of social conditioning on the prevalence of any condition that we're discussing. It could be anything, but something that's innate, it should happen everywhere. Like homosexuality is innate. We know it's innate. It's not something you can be conditioned out, or feminine homosexuality anyway isn't. And so we would expect to find it all over the world and throughout history, and we do find it all over the world and throughout history. It's everywhere. You know, there's a consistent prevalence of this phenomenon, which we can measure, we can read about, we can go and study, and it's the same across the planet. Now, if autogynephilia is innate, then it should do the same things. I found it troubling that so many authorities were saying that this was something that was innate, but was also only happening in the West. That doesn't work. That can't be the case. If it's innate, it must be in all human populations. And one of the things that was kind of confirming this idea that, you know, Blanchard couldn't be right, was that in Southeast Asia, it appeared that there weren't any autogynephiles. And this, again, has been something that some authorities have said, yes, there are no autogynephiles in Southeast Asia. Even Ray Blanchard, I believe, believed this at one point until I pointed out to him that they did exist. So I started going to Southeast Asia to visit and to meet trans women. Don't no bones about that. I'm not a scientist, I'm a journalist. I don't have a problem with dating women while studying women. That doesn't bother me a bit. So I started to meet trans women, and the mismatch continued to appear. I was meeting trans women who had no interest, apparently, in relationships with women. They were seeking men. And of course, one of the things about autogynephilia is that these are heterosexual men. They're mainly attracted to women. And if they are attracted to men, it's a thing called pseudo-bisexualism, where it's not really attracted to the men themselves, they're attracted to the experience of having sex as a woman, okay, with men. And then in 2014, I met a transsexual whom I initially thought was obviously HSDS. I mean, I thought they were all HSDS. She was very short, not particularly feminine, stocky, I think would be the way I would describe her. And as I got to know her better, I realised that she simply, although she presented herself as being interested in having boyfriends, she in fact was not interested in having sex with men at all. In fact, she really rejected it. She was really completely against the idea. And this confused me a little bit, so I spoke to one of her friends who was what we would call a gay boy. You know, he was like a femboy. He was a very gender non-conforming male. He wasn't quite, you know, what we would call a lady boy, or you would call a lady boy, maybe that sort of completely transitioned, appearing to be a girl, but he had, you know, very effeminate hairdo, wore dresses, he didn't take hormones, and an extremely nice person. I liked this person a lot. And so I talked to her, and I said, well, what about this girl, this person I'd met, who was called Princess, we'll call her Princess. And he said, oh, she has a different girlfriend every week. And honestly, you could have knocked me down with a feather. And I was like, really? And he said, oh yes. Well, she said, yes, she doesn't date men at all. What she does is she chats to men online, hoping that they'll send her money, but in real life, she only dates women. And I must admit, my jaw dropped. I was like, are you kidding? Because that's autogynephilia. And for the first time, I'd come across a real example of a young transitioning autogynephilia. Well, this is a person who had transitioned at the age of 16. You know? So I started to look around. I went back and I read all of Blanchard's papers again, just to be sure that I hadn't missed something. And fair enough, it did appear that he was looking at a particular profile of this condition, in which the subjects appear in middle age or later. His median age of his group was 43. As I kept coming back to the Philippines, I was spending 5 to 6 months every year in the Philippines, and now I'm pretty well here permanently, I kept meeting more and more people like this, and hearing stories about people like Princess, who were male people who appeared to be women, but they only dated women. And this was fascinating, because it began to look as if autogynephilia was present in Asia, in the population in Asia. But most of the trans women I met were definitely what we call HSTS. They were actually attracted to men. They were homosexual transsexuals on a line of development with feminine homosexuals like this other person. So I found that this still was a problem, because in the West we know that it's about 50-50, or maybe a preponderance of AGPs over HSTS. Whereas what seemed to be the case here was that there were very, very few of the AGPs appearing in public. I then started to look at pageants and cabaret, which are theatrical events in which people can express themselves freely, without compromising their social position. And I suddenly discovered they were absolutely full of classic autogynephiles. And in speaking to them, they would say things like, "Oh, I'm actually bisexual. I date women and men," but they're actually pseudo-bisexual. And the HSTS, as you know from my videos, they exhibit a very clear clustering of physical characteristics. And I would go to pageants, often held in a local barangay, nothing big and fancy. We're talking about things organised at a village level. And on the stage you'd have two or three HSTS who are like 5'2" in their high heels, and classic HSTS, slight, pretty, neotenous, extremely girly, and beside them would be a row of 5'10" AGPs who were not even slightly feminine, although they were dressed up as beautiful women with amazing amounts of makeup and all the rest of it, wearing long dresses and all the rest of it. And that was when I suddenly went, Ray, you're right. Not only was Ray Blanchard right, but his model is predictive of the entire planet. Because I then went back to friends and contacts that I had made in the past in South America when I was researching a book called The Warm Pink Jelly Express Train, which is about two transsexuals in Paris. And I started to ask very specific questions of them. Only a few speak good English, but I'm able to get by in Spanish, about this phenomenon. And they said, yeah, that's the same thing here, We've got those as well. Yeah, they're all over the place. So suddenly I realised that the claims that had been made that autogynephilia was purely a Western phenomenon were not true. And that people like Mike Bailey were probably right. It probably is innate, because you do find it everywhere. It is absolutely everywhere. And I found out several other things as well. After looking at the pageants and the cabaret scene, which are absolutely full of trans women, you have to remember that these are, your typical, here in the Philippines and in Thailand, your typical HSTS is tiny, particularly in the Philippines. They're small people with very delicate bones. Not all, but they're very, very feminine, but they tend to be small. AGPs don't have that. They tend to be large. The average for men in their ethnicity. Princess had been very unusual because she was a very short guy, basically. That's what she was. She was stocky rather than petite. And I found that what happens is that within the cabarets and the pageants, the characteristics of the AGPs are actually selected for because they're tall. And they can be incredibly statuesque when they move. And these people are transitioning very young. We'll come to that in a minute. So they know how to move like women. And they understand how to make up so that they really do look incredibly beautiful. And especially under like artificial lighting, like stage lights, or in the street, they're stunning. They're just like, wow. They're really good at it. Other areas where you'll see autogynephilic trans women in large numbers are, funnily enough, comedy bars. A lot of the comedians are actually got autogynephilic trans women, and they're incredibly funny. I guess, an autogynephile's life is all an act, it's not real, it is just an act. So they're actually very good actors, or actresses if you like, and they can be extremely funny because they're very good at parody, and indeed self-parody. And I think that within this milieu where it's like in the comedy bars, they really enjoy it, they do really well. And usually if you go to a cabaret, there'll be the girly stuff, and all the plumes and all that stuff, There will always be a couple of AGPs come on and they'll do a comedy routine, and they'll take the mickey out of the audience and the women and everything, and it's all a good laugh, And I think they get life reward and satisfaction from that. I think it works for them. And an extension of that is that you see them on television. We have, here in the Philippines, they have very popular lunchtime variety shows that go on for like 4 hours. And there's always some expression of trans there, and it's nearly always autogynephiles. They'll get sort of autogynephiles on in these big dresses and stuff, usually from the pageants. As I say, the autogynephiles do very well in pageants because of their size. And again, they come on and everybody loves them. They get lots and lots of claps and applause, and the audience thinks it's absolutely hilarious and great fun. And the trans women themselves seem to, they kind of thrive on it. It's very interesting. It's very different from the Western thing where, it's almost like, don't look at me, I'm just an ordinary woman. Here it's like, I'm not a woman, but what I am is valid and worthwhile, and I can make you laugh. I'm an entertaining person. And I think that's validating, and they find it rewarding. And certainly speaking to them, they do. Because I've spoken to quite a few after shows, and talking about how they got into the business, stuff like that. So I discovered that there were large numbers of autogynephilic trans women appearing on stage in cabarets all over the country here in the Philippines. I discovered that some of them were fully heterosexual. They only dated women. Now, they might have been involved in chatting up men online, but that's a job. That's what they do for money. They're presenting themselves, acting like girls, and persuading men to send them money, And this is something that happens all over Southeast Asia, so if you're a man, be careful. But it's normal. It's seen as a job. And they don't actually ever meet the men, So their fantasy of being women is being fulfilled by this online game that they play, where men are saying, oh, you're beautiful, darling, you're lovely, I love you so much, and it's all complete nonsense, it's all just a fantasy in their heads. So you've got these heterosexual ones, and then you have the pseudo-bisexual ones, the ones who actually do have sex with men. And they exist too, and they tend to also do a lot of online chatting, but they will actually have relationships with men. But I've had relationships with girls like this, and I'll tell you right now, you know right away that you're not having a relationship with an HSTS. You're dealing with someone who's acting out a role. The AGPs, they don't have any real passion for men. Pseudo-bisexual AGPs, they might get passionate, but what is turning them on is the thrill of having sex like a woman. They don't have lust for their partner's bodies. And trust me, an HSTS does. It's absolutely night and day. It's totally different. The physical relationship that a man can have with an HSTS is turbocharged. And it never is with an AGP. It just isn't. It's like you're having sex with somebody who's not actually there. It's a very strange experience. And finally, a large number of them are analo-erotic. That means they don't ever have partners. They might do the online dating, and appear to men to be women to get money, but they never actually physically have sex with men. If you go on YouTube, you'll find there's YouTube videos of interviews, and I've certainly carried out interviews like this, but other people have too, where the girl says, no, I've never had a boyfriend. I've never done that. And she's like 24 or 25. No HSTS on the planet ever survived to being that age without having sex. It just didn't happen. They're all having sex at 12, 13, 14. This is a complete different profile. There's just no similarity. So how do we tie this in? The Blanchard profile of the middle-aged transitioning AGP is extremely rare in Southeast Asia. There have been a number of high-profile cases in the Philippines. So now I was completely satisfied that we were finding autogynephilia in Southeast Asia. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've been very close to some people who were autogynephilic. I've interviewed them in depth about their childhood experiences, and there's no doubt that it perfectly matches Blanchard's profile. The only difference was the majority appear much younger, and that's to do with social conditions in the Philippines, which are very different from those in the West. So that's what brought about my change of heart on autogynephilia. When I discovered all these things, I had to change my position. I had to say, well, Ray Blanchard was right. Autogynephilia is a real thing. It's not just restricted to the West. In that he was wrong. It happens everywhere. It appears, from reading the older literature, that you can find references to what appears to be autogynephilia hundreds of years ago in many different cultures. There's a famous personage called the Chevalier d'Eon, right, who gave his name to Eonism, which was an early name for transsexualism. And if you read that man's history, he was clearly autogynephilic. He lived the first half of his life as a man and the second half as a woman. The first 40 years man, second 30 years as woman, right? It's absolutely classic Western profile autogynephile. So there does seem to be something in Western European culture that prevents autogynephiles from appearing, right, from transitioning as early as they do in Southeast Asia, for example, and it's the same is true in South America. But that doesn't mean they're not there. The autogynephiles are definitely here, but they're appearing much younger. Now, if we come to what we're seeing today, and this is obvious through watching things like YouTube, there are numerous younger transitioning autogynephiles who are appearing on YouTube and claiming, as they always do, to speak for what they call transgenders generally. I'm thinking of people like ContraPoints and Justin Riley Dennis, and there's quite a few of them. Just looking at them, you know they're autogynephilic. And they are absolutely the Western counterparts of the young transitioning autogynephiles that I'm seeing here in the Philippines. At the same time, on YouTube you'll find people like Blair White, but she's not alone, there are many. Obviously, absolutely obviously HSTS. I mean, they just look like girls, right? And that's, at the end of the day, that's really such a tell. You know, if a trans woman really, really looks like a girl, even without makeup and even without hormones, then she's probably HSTS. If she looks like a guy, that's an AGP. And so what we're seeing is that through social media, the same things as appear in Southeast Asia are beginning to appear in the West. And we're seeing very young transitioning AGPs. And unfortunately, they're doing exactly what they always do, which is to try to muscle into the scene, to try to take over. They always try to erase HSTS. They try to colonize their experience. They try to say, well, you know, they're just like us. Well, there is no comparison. There is simply no comparison between an AGP and an HSTS. They're absolutely quantum different phenomena. They're just not the same. I mean, the only commonality is that they're born male and they want to appear as women. Everything else about them is different. There's just nothing similar. And I think that we have to be aware of that, because what is happening is that there is a risk that once again HSTS will be erased and oppressed and shut down by loud-mouthed autogynephiles. And Justin Riley Dennis, has been trying to do this to Blair White for years now, trying to close her down and regurgitating all this utter bullshit, this politically correct, gender theory bullshit. It's all lies. It's all lies. It's all lies set up to justify a particular point of view. So that's how I changed my mind, and now I feel so completely convinced that Ray Blanchard is right, amongst others, that it's made me more worried about the situation for HSTS in the West. I mean, HSTS here in the Philippines are really able to look after themselves. They are so numerous that nobody's going to erase them. It just isn't going to happen, you know. And they're feisty too. They're going to stand up and say, "No, you can't erase me. What are you talking about? I'm a girl." That's what they'll say. "Get off. I'm a girl." I think there is a risk of these younger AGPs doing what their older sisters, if you like, have been doing historically, which is to erase HSTS, to suppress it, to say, no, it doesn't exist. It's not a real thing. Well, it is a real thing. And I'm so concerned about the situation that HSTS are finding themselves is that I'm launching a new resource, and I've got a little bit of help for that, so thank you, you know who you are, which is going to be called All About HSTS. It's in development now. I hope to have it fully up and running and launched, publicity and all that, within the next 6 weeks. And I hope you'll come along and visit allabouthsts.com. Don't forget, at the moment it's behind a membership wall. You can message me and I'll give you a membership if you want. Once it's all ready to go, it'll be open to everyone. So yeah, that's how I changed my mind, and that's how I feel about it now. Thank you very much for your time. See you later.